Oh,
Meeting to order now that it's being recorded. Um, just before we do the roll call, I just want to make a quick announcement that in accordance with Public Act 101-0640, this meeting will be held in person and by remote attendance, and all votes will be taken by roll call. Information relating to how members can participate in the meeting or submit comments is on the Downers Grove Public Library's website. Caitlin, could you proceed with the roll call, please?
Trustee Doherty. Uh-oh, she froze.
she's muted.
Oh,
she also appears to be frozen and pixelated.
Oh, all right, we'll come back to her.
Now she's
Trustee
worse.
Here. Trustee Humphreys.
Here.
Trustee Kuntia.
Here.
Trustee Stapleton.
Here.
President Graber.
Here, thank you very much. We're now on to agenda item 3, the welcome to visitors for future reference. We do welcome visitors and we appreciate their interest in the library. We're now on to agenda item number 4, approval of last month's minutes. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding last month's minutes?
I have one minor correction under number 10, librarian's report. The second sentence starts with the word staff. It should be visits.
I missed something.
That wouldn't be picked up in with spell check either, unfortunately.
Nope.
I had one minor revision to another one that wouldn't be picked up. In number 9, in the second to last paragraph, the word taxpayer should just be one word.
Oh.
And then it is correct in the next sentence, so. That was my only comment.
Spell check does not help you when you make words.
Right, any additional questions or comments regarding last month's minutes? Okay.
We'll move to approve last month's minutes. I will second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve last month's minutes that has been seconded. Caitlin, can you please proceed with the roll call?
I still don't see Trustee Doherty, so we will come back to that if she pops up. Trustee Gagani.
You have a quorum, so if I mean,
okay.
Hopefully we'll be able to participate.
Yeah,
but...
I'll call her if she pops up. But,
okay.
Trustee Gagani.
Yes.
Trustee Humphreys.
Yes.
Trustee Kuntia.
Yes.
Trustee Stapleton.
Yes.
President Graber.
Yes, thank you very much. We're now on to agenda item number 5, financial matters. Julia, I have a daughter named Julia, so that was where that came from. Julie, can you help, let us know how we're doing financially?
Sure. So we are 58% through the year. Our revenues are on track through July. You can see that we've collected 54% of our property taxes. And just a reminder on the revenue side that charges for services revenue amount, that reflects the ComEd incentive that was the last of the HVAC project incentives from 2019 that did arrive in 2020. On the Library Capital Replacement Fund, the train and VAV box replacement has been completed, so you will be seeing the final invoices there. And just also a reminder that it was a 3 payroll month in July, so that will be a larger than normal amount. But our expenditures through July 31st stand at 51%. And that's even with our 3 payroll month.
Right, and I think the what's nice is that, and we talked about this last month too, is that I guess one of the silver linings is that our expenses are significantly below budget. I think it's about 7% or so if we, if everything were paid sort of equally each month. So it seems like we're in pretty good shape financially. And Julie, do you have thoughts on, should we have Carissa vote on the approval of the minutes, or should we just continue forward, or what?
I think we should just continue forward and have Caitlin note in the minutes where Carissa dropped and came back.
Yeah. Sounds good. Do we have any questions or comments regarding the financial matters?
I move that we accept the financial matters and payrolls as presented.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second. Sorry, it took me forever to find the microphone. It's having a moment.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the financial matters as presented that has been seconded. Caitlin, can you please proceed with the roll call?
Trustee Doherty,
Yes.
Trustee Gagani,
Yes.
Trustee Humphries,
Yes.
Trustee Kuntia,
Yes.
Trustee Stapleton,
Yes.
President Graber.
Yes, thank you very much. The financial matters as presented have been approved. We're now on to agenda item number 6, public comment on agenda items. And as noted earlier, we do not have any public in attendance and no comments were submitted. So we're now on to agenda item number 7, public comment on other library business. And again, there were no public comments and no public in attendance. And so therefore, we're on to agenda item number 8, new business. Julie, do you want to let us know how about the proposed revision to the bylaws?
All right, so this and the next item are both coming from the brand new Serving Our Public 4.0 standards for Illinois public libraries. Those did come out earlier this year. You each received a copy. And in the core standards, one of the things that they had were some bylaws ideas for bylaws, including a checklist that was in the appendices of that document. So I went ahead and went through the bylaws and added anything that was missing, made any necessary updates and corrections to the bylaws. These are mostly fill-in things, as you can see in the board packet. That list, it's primarily things that came straight out of the standards checklist with their wording. We did add the removal of trustees as the our village of Downers Grove can remove trustees by their home rule authority. So we referenced that specifically. So this is the first reading. And the way that we do bylaws is there is a first reading. You can make any comments or suggestions at this time. Next month, there will be a second reading with any revisions presented at that time. And then we'll have a third and final reading in October, which will be when those are actually acted upon. So according to the bylaws, that's the way we do it.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Are we going to go through them in any level of detail, or are we just going to see if anybody has any revisions?
Just going to see.
Do you want those tonight, or do you want those next month?
Tonight, if you have any.
But you just want them all in bulk? We're not going to go through them.
No, I wasn't going to go through them point by point unless someone had wished to do so.
Yeah, there really weren't, although the bylaws are, maybe 10 pages or so, there really weren't that many, maybe even, less than that, but there weren't there weren't that many revisions to the existing bylaws. I mean, the one comment I would have, and I'm not sure if, I don't really have a, not sure what my proposal is on this one, but, and again, this is so, it's hard to imagine this actually being relevant, but just as I was reviewing this, the provision that dealt with the removal of officers. So this is 1.58, which is on page, I think, 26 of the packet. The only thing, so basically what this provision says is that, so we've got, so previously in the bylaws, we have the provision that's new that, you know, makes it clear that the village council can remove trustees, which I think not only, I think that's the law, but then also that makes sense.
Well, that's a new law, or at least a new interpretation of a law.
Right. My thought process on that is the fact that the village, given that they have the authority to put us on the board, has the ability to take you off. I mean, there's got to be some mechanism, it would seem. That's just that's my interpretation of it, I guess. So
Yes,
so
and this is the removal of officers is about removing president or secretary from the office of president or secretary, not about the removal of trustees, which is a separate section.
right. Yeah, I started with the removal of officers, but then I went back to, so the removal of trustees is one area. I don't have any comments on that. The 1.58, the removal of officers, and this is why I just think this would be a very unusual situation where the board wants to take action to remove an officer, but that person has, you know, that person's not being removed by the village council. So I just find it to be an unusual scenario. But what I was thinking about was, like, should we have something in this 1.58 that says that the person whose office is being voted upon as to whether they're being removed, should they be specifically excluded from participating in that vote? And I'm just thinking because, you know, if the board has 6 people and that person can vote, then you could end up with a tie essentially as to whether or not that person should be removed or not. And so if they're specifically excluded from participating in the vote, then we have 5 other members of the board, and there will be a majority one way or the other. Now, the only reason, then I started looking back at some other provisions, and it doesn't seem like, you know, even when I was voted in as president or Dave was voted in as secretary, I think there's nothing that precludes us from participating in that vote. And so I didn't want to necessarily make a change here if it then required us to make changes everywhere else, because it's really, you know, it'd be a very unusual situation to begin with. But maybe just, I think, so I don't really have a specific comment other than to go back to Julie, to you and to the staff and say, like, just maybe think about that and whether or not that's a change that we may want to have on 1.58. I'm also open, obviously, to other members of the board's position on that. It just seems, to me, it just seems unusual for the president or treasurer or secretary, you know, whoever's being voted upon participating in that vote.
I'm not sure the board has the power to say that one of the duly appointed members cannot vote on an action item. That would be something I need to take up with our attorney. And I will say that in all of my years as a library director, I've never heard of this happening. It's never happened in one of my libraries, and I've never actually heard of it happening in another library, but it's one of the checklist items on serving our public.
And I would say this, like, I do agree with you, Julie. Like, it could just be part of the Library Act. Like, once you're on the board, you vote, and so I would say if we have to go to the attorney to have it clarified, I would let's just leave it as is and not worry about it.
Okay.
May I comment? It occurs to me that if a person is appointed by the village to the board, they are a full member of the board, and they are a full voting member of the board until or unless their term expires or they are removed. And so I would respectfully I think feel differently on this issue than you perhaps, and I think that all members of the board should vote on all issues unless or until they are removed or their term expires. I don't know whether that's in the law, but I believe that's it's customary with Robert's Rules of Order and with past practices of our board. And I mean, I'm willing to talk about it, and I could be convinced to change my mind.
Dave, I'm done. Like, we don't need to change it. We can leave it as
I mean, it's not a big deal, and I don't think it'll ever happen.
Right. So that's why I'm saying we can move on from it. I'm not interested in it. I don't want to go to the lawyer. I don't want to go. It would be a very unusual situation to deal with anyway. So
I did have another couple of other comments. I may have to hold them off till next week because with online agendas, I don't have the right software to make marks on my screen. I did want to comment briefly that the business of, there are two things that changed recently here. The business of the village council being able to remove a library trustee is a recent interpretation. The state law is silent on that topic, but it was the interpretation of our village council and supported by the court that because they are a home rule community, since the state law is silent, they can take that action, and the court did support that position. That's the reason they're adding this, though, is because of that. The other thing that changed is apparently the new state law, and I missed this one somewhere, but it used to be that the village council appointed a library board member each year. Now, apparently, the law has been changed, so they're appointing two trustees every other year. Is that correct?
Actually, the law was always 2 trustees every other year. I have no idea how we got off cycle.
Well, I stand corrected then, and I'm certainly glad that we have fallen in line with the law. In my 20-some years, we had a new member every year.
Yeah, and I have no idea why it was like that, and it was even in the bylaws that way. And I found it so unusual. I mentioned it to Dave Fieldman, and Enza Petrarca, the village attorney, also looked, and that's why we got the 2 trustees, and we're working on getting back onto that cycle now.
Good. Well, there's no reason why we shouldn't. I had a couple of others, and I don't think I want to take up time tonight trying to find them. I will do that before next week. They weren't big deals. That they were, I felt inconsistencies or perhaps errors, not in your changes, but in the earlier versions relating to quorums and things like that. So I'll find them and bring them up next month. They're not going to be contentious.
And you can always email them to me, Dave, and if there's anything that needs to be changed in the next draft, we can do that and then discuss at the next
fine.
meeting.
I don't want to take time tonight. So let's go ahead.
okay, any additional comments, questions, or proposed revisions to the bylaws? As Julie said, we'll have an additional opportunity to make comments on these if we'd like next month.
So since joining the board, I've kind of always thought that was a little, 3 reviews is kind of a bit much. And if that's in the bylaws, which I'm not seeing exactly where though, if we're editing the bylaws, if we wanted to change that to 2 versus 3, I get we could talk about it once before approval, but I think this is my second time through and they're usually pretty minimal. We're not digging a ton of changes. So just to save time on the future agendas instead of rehashing 3 times.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good thing to check. Does the state law require 3 readings?
No, it does not. It's in our bylaws, and that's section 1.8.
Well, then I would support revising it to 2.
If everybody's kind of nodding heads, I will make that change for the next meeting.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Okay.
All right, let's go to the
Any additional,
board stuff.
any additional comments or questions? Okay, thank you. We're now on to agenda item 8B, the library director evaluation form and process. Julie, why don't you tell us, give us some guidance on how we should go about reviewing you.
However
And
you
make it
want.
simple.
This is something that is in the Serving Our Public core standards for public libraries that the board should review the director annually. However, I have not been reviewed in my 4 years here, and I was unable to locate any form or process used with the previous administrator to review his performance either. So, so what you got is mostly stuff from an Illinois Library Association Trustee Day workshop a couple of years ago. Most of the libraries that I was able to secure forms from used this form, which is the first of your samples, or a variant on it, which are the next couple of samples. We do also have a version in your packet that is sample number 5, I believe, that is the one that's based on our performance evaluations that all staff receive, and that's based on the our job descriptions, and which is also included there. We do also use a self-evaluation form with most employees. I do that for all of the departmental managers every year, ask them to complete that self-evaluation form prior to my doing their formal evaluation. So I've given you a sample process and timeline. You can do it however you choose. There are many ways of doing this, as quickly and simply as the board getting together in a closed session just prior or just after a board meeting to do the director evaluation as a group, and then approving it at a subsequent meeting, and the president or chair of personnel committee, which we don't have, so president probably, presenting that review one-on-one to the director. There's no wrong way to do this. It's your preference.
I would say from my perspective, I've got to look more closely at the forms that were sent as far as kind of what's been used in the past and see which, because there were essentially 2 different versions, I think it looked like. But I will say for me, and this is, we get to see kind of one aspect. It's a very important aspect, but the one aspect of what you do, for the library. And I'm not sure what the best way to go about doing this would be, but I'm wondering if we could incorporate, some discussions with the department managers on just, what things that I'm thinking of it when I'm kind of evaluated by my associates who work with me, and they tell me they sort of compile all of the records and it's given to me. I don't know who's saying what about, who's saying the good things and who's saying the, the things that are not as good, but just, maybe incorporating kind of like who you see on a day-to-day basis into this process. And I'm interested as to how you feel about that, and also just, obviously the thoughts from the other board members as well.
I will simply share that in the past, I had a board that did that. And if there were issues with performance of one of the managers, it can very much skew the results.
Okay.
So it can skew what you're getting from the managers, and that one of the things that some of our managers do is they do an evaluation, a how am I doing to their staff that they just receive back anonymously to help them. And that was one of the things that I was hoping to do as we move forward. But if you would like to see those, that's great too. I can include that form in next month's packet if you'd like to see that as well.
Yeah, in my bigger,
So
oh, go ahead, Carissa, sorry.
no, that's okay. And I can't, my internet is still not great, so I can't tell whether you can actually hear me okay or not. So I'm going to speak really slowly. Okay. So
Your voice is
one
fine.
thing
Your
that I
picture
thought
is
might be
jerky.
useful. Okay. All right. Well, we'll just go with that. Okay. So one thing I thought would be useful for us to talk about as a group, I deal a lot with this type of thing myself, and I've thought a lot about what the most useful way to do this in fact is, and kind of it's a little bit of a rhetorical question, but for us to really think about what the process is for. So we know that there's things in the serving our public document that there's some things we need to meet there. So that's obviously it's for that. That's one thing we need to address. It seems like not having had this process in place at all previously, that having more structure. Well, okay, so not having any recent experience with at least within Julie's tenure, having some structure and continuity that then follows through board member tenure. I mean, it's great that you're here, Dave, but if you're the only one who remembers back that far, then it doesn't help me or some of the newer members to understand what that looks like. So I think that's, having some structure and continuity would be good. I couldn't tell from what you shared, Julie, and whether this is something that we can decide as a board or if it's something that's dictated by a law somewhere, but who gets to see the evaluation? So accountability seems like an important part of this too, but to whom? I mean, is it kind of to the village because that's where the money flows from? Is it to us ourselves as the board? I was curious about that, kind of where that would land. And then it seemed like the most important part, and this is kind of where I land in all of this, is just feedback for the current director, Julie, to say, okay, well, yeah, and maybe it's a reflection process, as you said, about how am I doing versus how, I hate to say how am I rated, but how does that compare? And then where are there areas for improvement? I've had some interesting experiences with kind of these numbers that get assigned to things. I think it's interesting, and especially in an aggregate, it can mean something. But not having a baseline right now, that the numbers that we have, if we do this the first time this year, the number's going to be kind of lacking in context. So I think that narrative part and really having those criteria that a few of the samples that you shared kind of as a way of structuring it and as a way of helping us understand what the important things are about your role, Julie. I think that would be the more important part for me to think about as someone who would be in that position versus like, okay, well, it's going to be a 4.5 and it's average, it's 4.2. That's going to mean nothing to us. And if the public saw it, and again, I don't know like where this would go, but if for some reason that were public knowledge or village knowledge or whatever, what does it mean to them? Kind of in that absence of more context.
Generally, this is an internal document that is used just by the board and by me about my performance. So it is usually held as closed session documents and a part of my personnel file, and any discussion of my specific performance is all in closed session.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I wasn't sure. I've not been in any closed sessions yet, I think. So
we haven't had one since 2017.
Just a little comment on
There you go.
history, and if I may, please. And I'm not trying to say that the future needs to be like the past. It definitely should not be like part of the past, the recent past. I have no idea why there have been no evaluations for the past 3 years. I wasn't board president, and Jonathan wasn't board president for part of that. And I think there was a lot going on, and we maybe just didn't get around to it. I don't know why. There used to be annual reviews of the library director. I don't know where that fell down. It might have been during the last director's tenure. We definitely did them every year with Christopher Bowen. And there were forms. Each year there was a form that the board filled out and then presented, and it was discussed. And Christopher also, sometimes it was the same form and Christopher filled it out for himself, and then we discussed it as a board and filled it out for us. But there was a process, and I would urge that there is a process. The comments I would have would be that some of these forms were extremely detailed, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but having 6 separate trustees fill out all of these detailed forms means there's an awful lot of paper, and in some cases that might not be necessary. I think that there should be the option of that, but there might be a process by which the board could choose to do it as committee of the whole and do it together in one closed session to perhaps make it a little more efficient, save a little time. But the other option is to have each director fill out prior to a meeting or something, the 6-page form or whatever it is, and in great detail, and then discuss and combine them all. I think that there should be annual goals established for the director. And then part of the review the next year is reviewing performance against those goals and coming up with new goals. I also definitely feel that the library director, prior to our at least final evaluation, should fill out some kind of a form for herself or himself, showing their opinion of their performance against their goals. And then we have something to talk about. The only other one thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up here, is the library director is not a department head of the Village of Downers Grove. The Village of Downers Grove Council appoints us as trustees. We run the library, and that the most important thing we do as trustees is appoint a library director and then hopefully monitor her but stay out of her way. And but then at the end of each period, we do evaluate the director, make whatever adjustments to the salary that need to be made on an annual basis, and then file those forms away somewhere in some secure place, because it is between the board and the director. They, I don't believe by any law, are open meetings items. No. And they definitely do not go to the Village of Downers Grove. They appoint us, and then they can appoint us and they can remove us, but that's kind of the limit of their authority. And I don't say that in any negative way. I just say that's the way it kind of is. So I'll shut up now.
So my 2 cents is I like the self-evaluation form that you have for Downers Grove Library, because that will give us some of the insight that John touched on that we don't see in your day-to-day, some of those points. I like the comment you had about how am I doing to the other employees and staff. That would also, again, give us light in that area. Of the different samples, I thought sample 1 was the best, and that may be why it was laid out first. Just be happy to do a closed session with the board. In my tenure, which is not that long yet, I do think we had this on the agenda, and maybe it wasn't completed, but I felt like we've talked about the review of the executive director. I guess one question is, I think that what may have happened in the past was just an evaluation around the salary only. John, is that maybe, or Julie?
I think we talked briefly about that at one point, or maybe a couple times. But I agree with, I think, Dave's comments, and I think Chris's and yours. I mean, to establish a more formal process. I think part of the issue from, I think, my perspective and maybe the board's perspective is that I'll speak for myself. We've been very happy with Julie. And so, and Julie and I came on about the same time. You were here a few months, I think maybe 6 months before I joined the board. And so it tends to be that you focus on problem areas versus areas that are going smoothly. And so that may not be fair to you, Julie, because it's like, okay, we'll just not worry about this because, you know, you're doing great and all of that. But it is something as a board we should get into a habit of having that process and going through it to provide you with feedback and kind of what, in a more formal way, kind of what we're expecting on an annual basis. And so I will say, just from my own, I think that some of the other comments that Kim and Carissa and Dave, I think I would prefer that if somebody else took kind of the reins on this. I don't know who from the board may want to do that, but I'm thinking that, you know, one approach, and again, there's a lot of different approaches here, but one approach would be to have us as board members. I agree with Kim. I like the first sample better than the second. And this, I think, goes along with what Dave was saying, or some others, where we maybe complete this and then give it to, let's say, and I'll nominate Carissa, for example, as the person who sort of gets the forms, consolidates the information, so that maybe Julie's not getting, you know, 6 different evaluations from us, but gets kind of a collective evaluation, so that it's kind of coming from the board in a very unified way.
And the second way to do that, and a number of boards do it this way, is they literally do a committee of the whole meeting, project the form up on the screen, and the trustees just sit in a room and do it together all at once. That's an option as well if you don't want to, you know, put the onus on one person compiling. So any of these work.
Okay.
That is the procedure that we used over most of the years I was here. We did it as a group. However, I think there was a process documented that each trustee could do it on their own, but each year we either informally or formally said, well, we're going to do it together this year. That permits the board to have a more structured process if it is felt that is necessary in some year. But if you want to simplify it in any given year and do it as a group committee as a whole, the way Julie just described it, in a closed session, and in effect fill out the form as a group, it is more, it's streamlined a little bit if it's appropriate to streamline it.
Mm-hmm. And it could be kind of a combination too, where each of us, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Carissa.
No, I was just going to say, I'd like to see if we could find some kind of medium ground there, because my feeling about you know, kind of a, what would you call it, a committee of the whole, like doing it all together, like putting the form up and us all looking at it and digging in. I feel like some people's voices might not be heard as clearly and absorbed as clearly as if everyone kind of went and reflected on their own and really took that time to do that. And then we came together, maybe had a discussion about some of those reflections and comments. I guess my fear is, and I know this happens a lot in meetings, you know, in my current work, the introverts and the folks that don't feel as comfortable like responding on their feet, it's sometimes tough to do that even with 6 people, and to kind of get all of those thoughts captured in a thoughtful way that's then useful for Julie. Hearing all of the different perspectives, I would worry that some of those perspectives would get left out.
That is a danger, and I don't disagree.
But I do
with
like the idea of having a discussion around it. So I like the discussion aspect.
Does anybody who and I don't know, like, I don't know if it's Carissa or Kim or like, who has or is there someone who wants to kind of take the lead on what this process should look like? Because I will say in my experience, I've reviewed lots of people. It's not been something, I would not say it's my strong suit. If someone's doing well, they're doing well. If someone's not doing, like, so I think that there may be somebody else who's better situated to really kind of take the reins on this.
I think we might decide the process first and then see who wants to try the lead.
Well,
unless
but
you want to appoint somebody and have them develop the process.
Exactly. That's.
Okay.
I mean, is this? And maybe we don't have to decide today, but if there's somebody.
I mean.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I would be fine. I would be fine with at least kind of putting together a suggestion for that. I did take a pretty close reading of the forms the last couple of days, and I agree that the first one is the most kind of comprehensive. Although comparing it against Julie's job description, I worry that like they don't completely match, and so I worry that we're like grading, kind of rating her or thinking about her job in terms that she might not already be thinking in terms of her job in. So I'd want to make sure that those are a little bit more closely aligned. But I did like the format of it. So I think, yeah, so I do have some thoughts about this, and I'd be happy to take the lead and kind of maybe put some thoughts together, share back, and then figure out, maybe then what the next step is in the process. The first step being maybe just landing on a rubric, like a form, maybe some kind of Frankenstein form based on the ones that we saw. And maybe that would be good to maybe understand what people did like or dislike about some of the ones the 5 samples that Julie shared.
And perhaps it could be just tweaking, like there've been several of you that have said that first form really resonated. So it may just be taking that first form and the job description and, kind of looking at the other ones to see if there was anything you want to cherry pick and, making Frankenform.
Well, and I'm also supportive of if Carissa comes up with something brand new that reflects more specifically. No pressure, Carissa, but.
Oh yeah, because I don't have e-learning starting next week or anything. I'll just,
Well, I will also comment that next month's board meeting is the board's listening session, so we have to keep our business very short. So you would really have until October before we really got into the meat of this.
So I have maybe a process question, because I did notice.
First of all, the job description is a lot harder. Excuse me. I was just going to say that the job description is a lot harder to change, and if we find something in the job description we want to change, that's a little bit bigger deal. We do want to have them in line with the form though, because we should be measuring her against the job description. I just like the process where once we get on a roll, we give her goals 1 year, and then the next year, once we get this established, the first thing to me would be for her to evaluate herself against that form and from the previous year and how she thinks she has done. That would be circulated all of us, and then we would begin our process of filling out our forms, and you would consolidate them and share them with her and so forth. But I think it would be very helpful and almost necessary for the board to hear from her against the form though.
So why don't we just, I don't know if you, I think you volunteered, Carissa. Well, why don't you, just over the next month, and obviously the rest of the board is here to help to the, if you have questions or thoughts on how to do that, and maybe it's something we can just have as a quick agenda item next month, maybe in preparation for if there's some sort of major structural issues that anyone has with the process, we can provide that guidance and then maybe finalize it in October and move forward quickly after that.
And if you do find there's anything missing from the job description that you think should be there or changed, yes, let's make sure that happens as well.
And also because this was a very unusual year.
I have a question.
I have this in the front of my head because I just finished my job evaluation at my church job. I just got evaluated myself. And I was both asked and then evaluated on a number of questions relating to how we perform as a result of the pandemic. So this is an unusual year. I think we should include some things about that in it. Normally they wouldn't be there.
I just have one point of clarification. So, because I don't know if I've seen this happen so far. If there's something or questions that I have kind of in between meetings or documents to share and exchange and gather feedback on in between meetings, what's the best way to do that among this group? I guess I haven't seen a whole lot of that happen, so I'm curious about what to do.
Because of the discussion, the requirements of Open Meetings Act and not discussing public business as a group outside of a public meeting, what we can do is if you have something, you give it to me, I push it out to everybody, people can individually respond, and then I can forward those on to you. Jonathan can also be the go-between in this, but it's meant to stop any, you can discuss these things one-on-one, you can provide individual feedback, but there cannot, the difference on the Open Meetings Act is that group discussion can only take place in this room.
Right. Yeah, I would just say, Chris, anything, I mean, you can communicate with any of us individually, but it's just, if there's something that you'd like to go to the group, just email it to Julie and then she'll take care of it.
That's very helpful. Yeah, I've never done that. And so I wasn't sure kind of what the best way to do, kind of, because even 2 months is not that much time. So I want to make sure to make the best use of that time, especially given that we're not going to have a full agenda in September.
And we can never reply all. We just communicate with Julie, and sometimes when I'm doing that, I automatically I copy the president of the board. But if we have something that needs to be distributed to everybody, it goes through Julie first. She distributes it to everybody, and then we respond to Julie, and she distributes our replies.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments regarding agenda item 8B, the library director evaluation form and process? All right, thank you very much, everybody. We're now on to agenda item 9A, the very important 2021 draft budget and levy, which this, I believe, is the third time we've seen it. There's some variation of it, and we do have to approve a version of this or a modified version, or so we have to approve a budget this evening. Let's put it that way.
If you want a levy, your levy request has to go to the village by the 31st of this month. So very important.
I think we want a levy.
Yeah. And my apologies, Jonathan found my error. It's on page 65 and repeated on page 73. The 2020 estimated beginning balance is reported erroneously as the $1,140,159. It should actually be the 2019 actual ending balance of $1,440,000 and $40,019. So there is actually $300,000 more in the library fund at the start of 2020 than is actually reflected in these estimates, just FYI. So going from there.
Good, which is a good thing.
Yes, so it's a good thing. There's more. There would be a larger fund balance, regardless of how much fund balance we use to support the 2021 budget. So your levy differences are about $2.50 to the average homeowner for the year per 1% of equalized assessed valuation. So at the 0% levy, your average homeowner saves about $2.50 per year. At the 2% levy, they pay about $2.50 more. This is with a 1% EAV figured in there. Remember that our equalized assessed valuation, the lowest it's been in the last 5 years was 3.5%. And so for every percentage point that the equalized assessed valuation is over that 1%, that's another about $2.50 per taxpayer that they save. So
Wow.
that's one of the reasons that we've been able to, in past years, do a 3% levy increase and yet still have the tax rate and what the average homeowner is paying going down, because the value of property in the village as a whole went up more than the percentage that the levy was raised. So again, top to bottom, you're looking at a difference of about $111,000 between doing a 0% levy and a 2% levy, and that's spread throughout the entire village of Downers Grove. So on the levy side, it will leave us well above the finance policies financial reserve obligation that we have written in, regardless of whether you choose a 0% or a 2% levy that we had discussed in previous months. On the expenditures side, this has the final thank you to Caitlin and Scott for going over all of the personnel lines with a fine-tooth comb and making sure that this the personnel lines are correct. It comes in at just under a 1.9% increase to wage and salary lines for the benchmark and minimum wage changes only. Using the merit for the COVID folks, for people who went above and beyond during the COVID crisis, that adds an additional just under 0.8%. So that makes it a total increase to wage and salaries of 2.6% in this budget as presented. The difference between that and the personnel total, as you see here, are insurance benefits and the IMRF retirement fund, that rate increase for 2021. On the non-personnel sides, it's a 0.3% increase, with the only major change over which we have no control is the liability insurance package that that adds a coverage, and then we have a very high estimated renewal premium, but we won't know that for sure until November. And that's following the recommendations of the broker for the LIRA insurance pool. So if anyone has any questions about the levy or the budget, just to remind you, the Library Capital Replacement Fund for 2021, this is a big year for us because it is the roof. That's the number one thing. And then the electrical relay panels, there's some smaller things in there, but really it's all about the roof and the electrical panel.
Are there any, I mean, I have my comments, but are there any initial thoughts on the budget? I think I've said my thoughts multiple times over the past few months already. But one thing from my perspective is, we're at a 7% positive variance right now with this year's budget, which if we essentially just maintain that through the rest of the year, we will be something like $400,000, positive this year versus the budget. And the total difference between the 0% and the 2% is, I think Julie, is like $111,000 or something like that. And so, I think either approach is, and I think Julie, you've, I think, assured us that either approach will work for the library.
Yes.
So, well, I think, I mean, I personally would just rather go with the 0% because, and I have done some additional research just on other libraries, and to be honest with you, it wasn't overly helpful because one thing that I noticed in the library's budgets that I checked out, I felt better about kind of our process actually after doing that, because if you look back at the past 4 or 5 years, at least since I've been involved in data, this probably goes back many more years than this, Downers Grove has been pretty smooth, kind of as they've as they've established budgets each year, smooth smooth things out for the taxpayers. And you have other budgets that I saw where there were some dramatic cuts in one year and then dramatic increases the next year, and maybe it's just because of swings and who's on the board. I'm not really sure why that was the case, but obviously 0 or 2% is a smooth, continues us on kind of the smooth path. I think I think Swapna said this last month, the idea of just the perception, it's $2.25 for the average taxpayer, I think, or average homeowner, one way or the other. So it really doesn't make an economic impact on the individual taxpayer. It really doesn't make an economic impact on the library. And so then it's like, well, then I start looking at other things, which are perceptions, and the perception of increasing the budget, amidst the pandemic. I mean, I can see the arguments on both sides. I would just, given that I think we can do this, very responsibly, that's why I would advocate for just the 0% and maintain the levy. But I'm happy to hear other thoughts and comments on this.
Real quickly, my thoughts too are along perception for our village, for the taxpayers. Since we did a merit increase, I think that we've been able to maintain and change the salary structure to what's most important is to retain our staff, which is excellent. We've also over the years fixed the capital funds replacement, and so we're in a good position to be able to do a 0% this year for those reasons.
Trustee Humphreys.
Yeah, I was muted, I'm sorry. I could go either way on this one, to be honest with you, because it's a relatively small amount here. I am a little bit nervous. First of all, I would love to say 0 because I think some other groups are going to be, especially the Village of Downers Grove, is going to be, they're going to have to go up quite a bit because the Village of Downers Grove does not depend on the property tax to the degree we do. They get about less than a third of their money from the property tax. The rest of their money is hotel tax, sales tax, various other use taxes, and those have been hit hugely by the pandemic. So their revenues are down 30, 40% or so in that area. So they're going to have to get some of that back somewhere. And some other taxing bodies are in the same boat. So if we can, in effect, help out the taxpayers by saying, well, we'll hold the line then because others are going up. The only reason that I'm a little nervous about that is the reason there has been a lot of sway in that number is because of the EAV. We pick a budget amount and a levy amount, and we base it on what our best guess, but then all of a sudden the levy, or not the levy, the EAV goes up because it's a banner year for new construction of commercial real estate. And that tends to raise the tax base, which lowers the individual hit per taxpayer. And I'm not sure that's going to happen next year. I'm a little bit nervous that the next quadrennial reassessment is not going to go up as much as we have been used to in the past. And therefore, somewhere down the road, either next year or the year after, in order to maintain our competitive position in the library world, in other words, to even stay even with our budget, we're going to have to raise our levy. And if we raised it a little bit more this year, we wouldn't have to raise it as much later. But that is done for perception reasons. And if on the other side, if we want to help the taxpayer this year because we think they're going to be hit from other places, then maybe that my earlier argument is falls away. So I can go either way on it as a way, you know, what I'm saying. But in any case, when the EIV comes out, it may be 2 or 3 or 4%. Which means our levy will go down anyway. So it's
right. In my thought process on that, Dave, I'm completely in line with you. Like we can't. When I'm evaluating the EAV, I'm looking at, or I'm trying to assess, and it's a lot of guesswork of, you know, what would be like the 20-year average EAV or longer, and trying to kind of stick within the range of that, because some years it goes up. I think when I was first on the board, it was going up by 6% a year, but you know, so we could have in theory said, well, we're just going to match the EAV, and then other years it goes down. I think back in 2009 and 10 it probably went down dramatically, and so it's trying to look at it kind of very long term. And I think I haven't looked back at the budgets from, you know, prior years, but or, you know, from prior to my involvement, but I think we've done a nice job, you know, over the past 4 or 5 years of essentially just staying within what I think would be the typical long-term EAV, you know, with respect to our increases.
well, we're getting built out to the extent in DuPage County, and especially in our library area here. So our EAVs are not going to go up like they used to, unless we build a lot more skyscrapers or unless we have a lot more inflation. But so that I think a 20-year average might not be a good idea. I think a 10-year average might be more reasonable. But I agree with your strategy.
And I want to try to take that into account too, but what I really want to place my vote on is the facts that we do have in front of us, where those are all speculative for future years. And I understand trying to forecast that, but we should take it year by year and with the current statistics that we have.
I can't disagree with that. I'm just trying to smooth it out over the years a little bit. But if that's not compassionate this year, or not politically correct, or however you want to look at it, then I can be swayed. It's only 120,000.
Less.
Chris, what are your thoughts on this? I'm just sort of interested in the other, on the budget. I kind of like to have get the feel of the board. If your internet's working.
It is. I have to find the button. I mean, I think my thoughts pretty much echo what everyone has said so far. It's a fairly small difference. I think it comes down to perception. I agree with what Kim said about not trying to base it on some crystal ball vision of the future, because we don't know. You know, what you're saying, Dave, about, you know, smoothing things out, I think that also makes good sense. I don't feel strongly one way or another. I think 0 makes a good, it's, you know, again, good for public perception. In the end, I don't know if people are paying attention that much to it either. So I don't know. I don't have a super strong feeling, but I do, you know, kind of echo what the rest of the board members were saying just now.
Swapna,
I agree with what you said, because I was just thinking about when Carissa said perception. I know Swapna brought that up last time, and thinking about the letter that we received about the fines, and just people feeling like maybe we're, I don't know, doing something that isn't necessarily supportive of the community. This is a way for us to say, look, we're, you know, so I'm just trying to think of perception wise, maybe the 0 is a nice gimme, even though it's not really making a difference to anyone and they don't even notice probably, but the people who do notice will be the ones who complain. And they're the same ones who are complaining about the library's books, you know, not charging fines. So maybe it's like that's all. But I don't really, doesn't make a difference personally, but that's just, I was just thinking about that letter that we received.
right.
I love it when the public speaks up on things, because it shows they're paying attention and so forth. But I don't think we can base our policy decisions on one letter.
Right. It's good to.
That's an obvious statement, but
right.
The one other thing I would like is before we end this topic, I'd like to hear one last word from our library director, who has a great deal more experience than probably most of us on this topic. And,
well, Dave, before we
first.
Really, let's hear from Swapna.
Oh yeah, I said before we end.
I mean, I gave you guys a brief glimpse of my thoughts last week, but you know, like all of you kind of similarly said, I guess my view of it is a little bit more of a, you know, optics, emotional kind of view of it. And so for that reason, I do lean towards the 0%. You know, and I was thinking about this earlier when I was with some of my neighbors, and they were like, oh, you know, we haven't even, you know, it's weird spending a summer in Downers and not even like, you know, going and hanging out at the library. And so their whole, you know, usage of the library has been different. And that's, you know, despite the fact the staff's been doing an amazing job, doing the best they can, providing a service. You know, it's just the role of the library in our usual patrons' lives has changed dramatically this year. And so it's difficult to say, yeah, you know, I know you didn't get to do anything this summer with us, but we want to also now, you know, increase our levy. And yeah, at the end of the day, you know, like Krista said, do people actually pay attention that much? No, probably not. But I just think it's just not the right year to do this, especially given that it's a very marginal difference. And I think Julie and the entire staff has proven before that our budgets are just nice and lean and have always come in, you know, thanks to Ian, we've saved a lot of money in that regard. So yeah, I would say I'm moving towards the 0%.
And I am comfortable with any of these. I do think that the 0% does have good optics. It's something that we could do a little, you know, PR about, and it's very much in keeping with, as Jonathan said, what the village is experiencing right now, and it really does kind of show that you as the library board are sensitive to what's going on at the village level as well. And to Dave's point about EAV, I just wanted to remind you that our equalized assessed valuation is actually on a 3-year rolling average. And so it does take 3 years of downward trend for it to actually hit the library's levy. So we can see it coming like we did in, after the 2008 housing crash. You could really see it. They got to see it years in advance. They knew it was coming, and so you could plan for it. And that's one of the things that the way Illinois does property taxes has a natural smoothing effect.
Okay,
with consensus.
with all of that said, do we have a motion? It sounds like we're all on the same page here. Do we have a motion to approve the 2021 budget and levy at a 0% levy increase?
So moved.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion to approve the 2021 budget at a 0% levy that has been seconded. Caitlin, can you proceed with the roll call, please?
Trustee Doherty,
Yes.
Trustee Gagani,
Yes.
Trustee Humphries,
Yes.
Trustee Kuntia,
Yes.
Trustee Stapleton,
Yes.
President Graber.
Yes, thank you very much. We have a budget for 2021. Thank you, everybody. If we were there, we could pop like the champagne or whatever. We're all
Excellent discussion. Excellent discussion. I'm proud to be a part of this board.
yes. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we're on to agenda item 9B, which I think could be a little bit faster than that agenda item, which is a repeat of what we've seen the past couple of months, the COVID-19 response and reopening phasing plan. And Julie, could you remind us of what we want, what you would like us to approve? I have it in my notes here somewhere, but just what the language is that you'd like us to approve this evening. Well, I'll just read it, I guess. It's to reauthorize the library director to continue to make temporary policy changes in consultation with the board president and within parameters of COVID-19 response and reopening phasing plan as presented. Do we have a motion to take that action?
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
I will second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We have a second and a third on this one. We have a motion to approve agenda item 9B, the COVID-19 response and reopening phasing plan that has been seconded. Caitlin, could you proceed with the roll call, please?
Trustee Doherty,
Yes.
okay. Trustee Gagani,
Yes.
Trustee Humphries,
Yes.
Trustee Kuntia,
Yes.
Trustee Stapleton,
Yes.
President Graber.
Yes, thank you very much. We've approved agenda item 9B, and we're now on to agenda item number 10, library director's report. Julie.
All right. Well, we had talked a little bit about statistics at the last board meeting. I believe it was Carissa who had asked, was very interested to see what the July statistics showed once we had almost an entire month where we were open to the public. We are down by 45% year over year in circulation. However, if you look at the downloadables number, those are up by 50% just for the downloadables. So we are seeing that increase of users in that way. Our gate count is down 63% year over year. Reference questions are also down 45%. PC use down by 65%, so it kind of mirrors the gate count. And our programs are down by 58%. However, those are really starting to ramp up, and I think you'll see a significant change with the August statistics, also in circulation, especially as in August we have restarted interlibrary loan, and so we've really seen that kind of ramp up now that we're kind of getting back to a little more normal. We do have we're making baby steps on that COVID plan, but especially after this week's mitigation in Region 7, which is our next door neighbors here in Illinois, and what's going on around us in DuPage County, we are really taking this slow. Our next big change is going to be the curbside changes. We're phasing into self-service holds. We will be phasing out the bagging of curbside in pickups in advance, and working toward reopening the Curtis Street entrance. One of the things we're going to do prior to that actually starts on Monday. We are going through with the rather expensive, but we can handle it because we're not doing strategic planning in this year. We're going to have the sculpture, the Journey to Janus sculpture that is in the upper portion of the Curtis Street atrium, that it continues along the spine of the building and turns left along the clear story windows. We will have that sculpture cleaned and any conservation that needs to be done. So Margaret will start that. Margaret Sawchuk of the Art Conservation Lab will be starting that on Monday. She has to rent 2 different scissor lifts to get this accomplished, one for the downstairs portion, another one that fits in the elevator to go upstairs. Luckily, those are a little lower, so she doesn't need the bigger lift. So that project will take about 2 weeks, and we anticipate reopening the Curtis Street entrance as soon as she's done. Then if you are hearing anything out in the community about what people's wants and needs about the library, please do share those with us, because that feedback does have a big impact on what we're doing as we're planning our next steps in our phased reopening. And I do want to give you a heads up that just today we received word that the Rails delivery guidelines regarding quarantine are going to change again. Although it took them longer this time than it ever has before, upon the release of the Realm study results, they have asked that we extend our quarantine back to 7 days based on the 3rd round testing, and also on the mitigation and step back in the Restore Illinois plan. So that will be effective on Monday the 31st. So those are the big things going on around here.
Thank you very much, Julie. I'll just lead us into agenda item 11, trustee comments and requests for information, because I have a comment on the statistics. Is there any explanation for the fact that I see in July of 2019 there were 15,000, almost 16,000 checkouts at the staff desk, and now there were actually more of those. Are there? Did we scale back the self checkouts or something?
Oh, one of the things to remember is that all the curbside happens at staff desks.
Okay.
So all those curbside checkouts are staff desk checkouts. So you will see that continue as curbside continues. So it will skew our numbers a little bit.
Okay. And my only other comment, thank you for that, is where, and I know it's a fluid plan, but what are your thoughts on, just moving forward, and what are the next steps for the library as far as the kind of reopening, the phases that we're in, and kind of where do you see us going, at least based on current information from here?
Well, the next step with Swan will be starting our pickup anywhere again, so that patrons from any library can pick up their holds here at Downers Grove again. That option has been turned off in the Swan catalog for a long time, basically since we closed. So that will be coming back in September, reopening the Curtis Street entrance, and then our next steps is to look at, are we ready to increase the amount of PC time that people can have, increase their visit duration, whether we're ready to put chairs back in any location in the library. Those are the big things in our next steps. And really at this point, we're all a little on hold while we watch what's going on with these mitigations and where those numbers are going. So our first step here will be reopening this Curtis Street entrance and then watching those numbers for when we're ready to make that next extension into allowing longer visit times. A number of our neighbors in the DuPage County area have gone to 2-hour visits and 90 minutes of PC time. So that is likely to be our next step. It's just when that happens.
Okay, thank you. Do we have additional trustee comments or requests for information? Mr. Humphreys.
I just want to applaud the staff again. I've been in the library several times over the past month, and I think they're doing an outstanding job. It looks different, and I know that they're not able to do some of the things they want to do. They want so hard to just run over and hold your hand, but like our staff does. But that will happen again, but not yet. That's the good news. Is the kind of bad news is I don't want to rush too fast, because the numbers they're still going up a little bit in our part of the county, our part of the state, not as fast as Will and Kankakee did, and they got, well, not stomped on, but they got to pull back just a little bit. If our numbers start speeding up a little bit again, that could happen to us, and I don't want to be to the least bit a contributor toward that. So I'm a little conservative on reopening plans. However, I trust our staff to look around and decide what's safe and what's not. And I think they'll do a good job there. I think the realm study slowed us down just a little bit. Some of the latest findings were a little more than 3 days, and we reacted, and Rails reacted, and that's a good thing. That's what they're supposed to do. So just a comment down the road, and I'm going to be optimistic that this is going to end in our view. And whenever that happens, we're going to launch into marketing mode and get that circulation right back up where it was. Our community will demand it if they're reminded of what it used to be. And our job is going to remind them of the way it was, and they're going to say, oh yeah, and they're going to flock back here and keep our staff and our library busy again.
All right, thank you. Any additional requests, trustee comments, or requests for information?
I have just a quick, and I apologize if this isn't coming with a lot of helpful suggestions or kind of a lead off, but you know, as you know, District 58 is fully remote as of now, and the libraries are all closed. And I know for our child's school, the librarian is actually being reassigned as a classroom teacher, just to kind of fill the needs for spacing and all that stuff when and if we go back. So I'm just curious to know, or if it's possible to, you know, find a way for the public library to kind of fill that void of kids not being in a library and checking out real books and being able to browse titles and, you know, is there some way to collaborate or support the, the school librarians or that, experience in general?
Well, one thing that we did recently is we have agreed to accept returns for any material from District 58 or District 99. We will be collaborating with the two districts to get that material back to each of those, any of their locations. So that's one way that we're doing that. And then this isn't quite ready for prime time, but I'll give you a little sneak peek. We have touched base with District 58, who obviously has other priorities at the moment, but we've been talking about the idea of getting cards for all students in District 58 that are residents of Downers Grove, and even the possibility of extending that to any students in an unserved area for a library. It's actually a lot more complicated than it sounds, but a number of libraries in our region have done this through intergovernmental agreements and memoranda of understanding, and it's something that we are going to pursue with District 58, and that Dr. Kevin Russell has been very supportive of, but obviously has not had time to really fully look at. So we're hoping to make that happen within the next few months. So stay tuned for that.
Thank you.
That sounds excellent.
I'm really Yes, Swapna, I'm really glad you asked that. That was going to be my question as well, because I seem to remember there being something about like some hints of a rumor of something happening with District 58 at last board meeting. I wonder, and so I have a follow-on for that then maybe will help, and a question kind of come from two different angles, but maybe meet in the same place. I noticed for program attendance for July, it was passive programs, and I'm assuming those are like the kind of pick up a kit of things and go kind of program versus the use of Zoom, or for example, and doing that kind of program. Is that a fair assumption? I couldn't remember if there were any kind of live programs in July.
The way that we calculate passive programs, you're right. It's the make and take programs plus pre-recorded videos that are posted on online. So those views are considered passive as well.
That makes sense. So I guess then my question is, are there going to be synchronous programs coming? And I should know this, I apologize. Are there synchronous programs in August? And then is there a way then to support District 58 with more synchronous activities, not maybe curriculum based, but online reading groups, or story time is not quite right maybe for those middle grades, but some other support around literacy and reading that can be done not on site, but using some of these tools that the library has invested in recently.
And Erin Linsenmeyer is our school outreach coordinator, and she is working closely with the schools to see what are they asking for. At the moment, they aren't asking for anything because they are really focused on remote learning, figuring that out. So far, we haven't had a lot of ask from them, and so we're looking to support them as best we can with getting off to a good start to this school year, and then we'll take on what else can we do for you. It is important to note that things like our book discussion programs are the synchronous, so they are considered the active programs, and those are up and running again. things like we do have some more of those coming in September as well, with our month of diversity, equity, and inclusion programming, as well as our listening sessions, which will also be events that will count in our programming, and just reminding everybody to attend the listening sessions for our diversity, equity, and inclusion, both the community events, and then remember that the board event is part of our next board meeting.
So along those same lines, I think it's more supporting the parents than the school district, and the parents again then are the taxpayers. So I know two things that you guys have done: the brown bags on Mondays. There's 50 of those available at 10 a.m. But I understand all 50 of them are gone before 10:45 every day on Mondays. And there was also a Russia project where you'd get a snack and a craft, and I did come in, and those go fast also. So it sounds like families are very hungry for these activities because we all want our kids to be off technology. So even the synchronous events, that's just in front of a screen. So I love the bag ideas, and the Emporium. Those are the areas that are going to diversify more than the e-learning that's going on already.
Yeah, and at the moment, our kids department is sticking with the discovery kits as they have been doing them, just until we see what happens when school's back in session. If the demand is still there, then they will ramp that up. If the demand starts to diminish, then they will react appropriately. We are also working on some additional resources for parents, and particularly for parents who have chosen to homeschool. And so that those additional resources are under development so that we can get those launched as soon as possible for the parents who are looking for that support.
All right, thank you.
I want to jump in. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Carissa.
I was just wondering, we all saw the email with the negative comment about fine free. Did we get any positive feedback from folks, either in writing or in person? Has there been any kind of on the other end of the spectrum there for that decision that we've made recently?
Absolutely. We've gotten some really great feedback, particularly people at the desk, people saying that they've come back to the library because they don't have to worry about fines. So we are re-engaging people who weren't using the library for that reason.
That's great. Thank you.
Mr. Humphreys.
Yeah, I'll echo that one. I've had a number of people come in, and one person said, well, it's about time, and they started rattling off the names of all the other libraries that already did it. So I think that we were to the point where it almost cost us more to collect those fines than it did to bank them. And I think that was the right thing to do, and I assume that we all feel that way. I don't want to let this go by without thanking the library for its role, its leadership role in the August 5th listening session about policing in Downers Grove. I think that was an excellent session, and if you haven't had a chance, if you weren't there and you haven't had a chance, then go on the library website and do a little digging, but you'll find a link to the recording on that.
dglibrary.org/listen will take you to the webpage that not only has the recording of the listening session on policing, it also has the information about the community listening sessions for diversity, equity, and inclusion coming up in September.
And just finishing the policing one, I've heard about that from some other people outside Downers Grove saying, wow, it is so wonderful that Downers Grove did that. And I think the village council feels good about it. And I think it was a good partnership with the village to do that. So it was just a win-win all the way around. The diversity, equity, and inclusion sessions, I'm really looking forward to our participation in that after the meeting next month. Did you think it was good or bad? Or, I mean, are you encouraging us to participate in the community one, or be a fly on the wall there and listen but don't speak? Or what's the best procedure there? The community one.
I would advise the board to, if you want to attend, to be a fly on the wall for the community sessions, and really make sure that you have your say at the board session. But help us get the word out and get people participating, because we want people to participate, and especially those that we don't necessarily hear from a whole lot. We do have folks that are reluctant to give feedback. So please encourage everyone you know to attend and to participate.
Yeah, and those sessions cover a lot of ground. This is not narrow topics, but they're very inclusive, if you pardon the pun, to some very important subjects that are on television every day now. So I think it's important that the community speak up. And I'm, again, so glad we're doing it. And I was thrilled to see the rather long list of staff sessions on this one. Mm-hmm. Staff, line staff and management and leadership, and it's excellent. Thank you.
All right, any additional trustee comments or requests for information? All right, well, thank you very much, everybody. It was a great meeting, and we'll see everybody next month.